My name's Ed Stafford, I'm an explorer, and this is my above and beyond story. Everyone told me I was going to die. When I announced at the beginning of 2008 that I was going to attempt to become the first person to walk the length of the Amazon, nobody thought it was possible. I didn't have any money to get an expedition like this off the ground, and so I applied to Sir Ranulph Fiennes, who had an expedition trust, to get a grant off him. They consulted an Amazon expert, and the Amazon expert reported back to the trustees that to walk the length of the Amazon was impossible. Luckily for me, RAN has this lovely tradition of supporting mad but marvellous expeditions, so they thought, okay, well, this guy qualifies, he's mad, and if he comes back alive, that'll be marvellous. So he gave me some money, which was nice. The plan was really simple. I was going to leave the Pacific coast of Peru, which is here. I was going to walk up and over the Andes Mountains, find the furthest source of the Amazon, which is on a mountain called Nevado Mismi, follow the river all the way through Peru, through the tiny little southern tip of Colombia then, and then right across the map to the Atlantic Ocean, right the way through Brazil. Logistically, that was pretty easy to do. I just had to keep the river on the left-hand side, keep walking downhill, and 2.5 years later, I'd be at the mouth of the Amazon. I wanted it to take a year. It was a kind of sizable chunk of my life that I was prepared to give up for a daft jaunt like this, and so I divided the length of the river, which is about 4,000 miles, by 365 days, because that's how many there are in a year, and I came up with 11 miles a day, and I thought, could walk 11 miles a day, that sounds quite feasible. Actually, with machete in hand, chopping an opening through the jungle, I actually averaged 4 miles a day, so the expedition took 2 years and 4 months, 860 days to complete. I started it with a mate of mine who was called Luke Collier. We were both based in London. We had every opportunity to go to the Royal Geographical Society, the home of British exploration, to get the official coordinates for the official furthest source of the Amazon. But we didn't. We went to Wikipedia instead, and probably not surprisingly, the coordinates were completely wrong. The little stream of water didn't even flow into the Amazon basin. So we kind of used the force. We kind of knew roughly what it looked like from a bit of research on the internet and photos and stuff, and we eventually found this very infamous white cross, which was a white wooden cross on the side of this mountain, and there was a rock above it and streams of water trickling out of it, and we thought, this is lovely, this is a very romantic notion of the furthest source of the Amazon. So we took some photos, got out the Union Jack, and then annoyingly we found another cross, which was an iron cross that was put there by National Geographic, and then we found another plaque that was put there by another expedition. We thought, this is rubbish, there can't be multiple sources of the Amazon all on different points in the same side of this mountain. So we thought the only real way to cover all bases, because there were glaciers above us and therefore subglacial streams, was to summit the mountain upon which all of these supposed furthest sources of the Amazon sprung. So we did that, got up early the next morning. The summit was about 5,600 meters of Nevado Mismi, so starting to get into altitude sickness territory. So we were kicking steps into snow and stuff like that. Got to the top, and the utter relief of 3 weeks of walking. That was the longest walk I'd ever done in my life up to that point. 3 weeks of walking from the coast of Peru, but we were at the start point, and definitely everything was downhill from now on, including, unfortunately, my relationship with Luke. After 3 months of the expedition, he said, I've completely had enough of you, I'm going home, which he did. At this point, the expedition started to get quite a lot more dangerous. We were going through the red zone, which, for those of you who don't know, is the sort of lawless drugs trafficking area of Peru. The area also spills into an area of very cut off indigenous tribes. We haven't seen any sign of life, human life, whether it be a path or a machete cut in a branch. We're getting on for 2 weeks now. This is the most remote we've been so far by miles. If we have an emergency now, if we can't deal with it ourselves, we're dead. Full stop. I just thought, do you know what, the risks are quite high now, and I'm going to try and mitigate that by making a little rule to myself. And my rule was that I wouldn't walk on my own. I would always try and walk with somebody else. Sometimes that would be a couple of local guys who would decide to walk with me for a day. Sometimes they'd just walk for half an hour and get bored and decide to go back to their village. So I went down river to this little indigenous community, walked around the village, quite intimidated, quite scared. It was the bottom of the river Na, which is right bang in the centre of all the troubled areas in the jungle in Peru. And every single adult male, again, in this village said, no, I'm not prepared to walk with you. And then this little boy who'd actually been on the boat, which I came in on, had a massive grin on his face. He was only about that high, and he just said, with a massive grin, he just said, I'll walk with you. And I said, brilliant, I think. How old are you? And he said, 16. What's your name? He said, Elias. And so Elias and I became walking partners, and I bought him a pair of plimsolls and a pair of shorts and he came on the boat back with me. He was about to join the army, and for him this was a massive adventure. We walked for about 6 days together. Eventually we came to a little community called Pamakiari, and a woman ran out screaming and threw a bucket of water over me, and then this big crowd of predominantly women stood in front of me, and they blocked the way. And then I caught the eye of a taller lady at the back who was wearing the same indigenous face paint and the same beads, and she moved slightly forward to the crowd and held out her hand and said, are you English? My name's Emily. And in a really posh English accent, and I was just like, oh my goodness, thank you. Emily turned out to be an Italian anthropologist, and she said, have you got any idea where you are? Have you got any idea what these people have been through? And I have to admit, I hadn't. I'd spent my entire time either planning the route or trying to get funding for the expedition, and I hadn't done any research into the indigenous tribes. As I started communicating with Emily, they did indeed calm down, and she had spent 6 months working with the indigenous overseeing community in a nearby town to be allowed to come and study these indigenous tribal people. Elias had to go home. Elias was a little bit young, and he was, as I said, joining the military. And Emily actually introduced me to a guy called Cho. This is Cho here. Cho and I think it's fair to say, didn't get on very well at first. But what I couldn't fail to notice was that Cho was extraordinarily confident, and he wasn't intimidated, and completely opposite to me, who was a paranoid, nail-biting mess at this point of the expedition. Cho had confidence. He knew the dodgy areas, and he knew the dangerous areas, and he knew the safe areas as well, which was extraordinarily helpful for me. So I started walking with Cho, and he said he'd walk for 5 days, and then after that 5 days, he said, do you know what, Ed, I'm still quite enjoying this, if you want, and I'll walk with you all the way to the mouth of the Amazon. And that's what happened. He literally never went home. For the next 2 years of his life, he walked with me all the way through Peru, Colombia, and then right the way to the mouth of the Amazon. And actually, towards the end of the expedition, he wanted to expand his English, and so we talked about coming over to England. So eventually we did. In fact, after the expedition was finished, if we fast forward a little bit, he came over to England. He lived with my mum up in Leicestershire, and he played for my local rugby club. And then at the end of season dinner, he got awarded Overseas Player of the Year, which was quite a nice thing. So Joe and I were the new walking team, and we walked all the way through Peru. We walked through first Amazonian flood season, and I don't think anyone, even if you go back to Percy Fawcett, the old British explorer, they would only go into the Amazon jungle during the dry season. The wet season was off limits, and that Joe and I didn't want to hang around in a jungle town for months and months on end. It was far too expensive. We didn't have enough funds to be able to do that, so we just had to walk straight through the flood season. And the Amazon River, when it floods, it's not like there's a canal towpath down the side of it. It floods up to 80 kilometres either side of the main channel of the river. This is why everyone thinks it's impossible. This is why no one can walk the Amazon, because they think it's all underwater and therefore you can't walk. But if I now know the extent of the river at peak flood season, I can annotate my map and I can plot a route on high ground. The mapping situation on this whole expedition was ridiculous. For a large part of it, in Peru, I was using these navigational charts down here, but there was so little detail on it. This map here I was using for quite a substantial period, and that's a 1 to 4 million map of the top half of South America. You can see you've got Suriname, Guyana, Venezuela on that, Colombia, and I was using that to navigate using a map and compass when the GPS stopped working, which was quite farcical. But at the end of the day, I was just going east. And I knew that if I woke up in the morning, and during the morning I headed towards the sun, and in the afternoon I just followed my shadow, that I'd loosely be okay. And it turned out to be the case. You were walking around in circles if you used too detailed information, and we just had to, as much as possible, employ local guides who knew the way to the next village. That was by far the most efficient way of getting from one village to another. The hunting trails, and obviously a lot of the time they would go by river, but we were like, no, we obviously can't go by river. We just want to use the hunting trails to get to the next village. And at the beginning of 2009, we entered Brazil, and if you cast your mind back to that time, The financial situation in the world was collapsing, and I just thought rather smugly to myself, what a brilliant time to be walking the Amazon. And I got an email from a main sponsor saying, I'm really sorry, Ed, but we can't continue to fund your expedition. We're just running out of our own money, clients are withholding money. It was extraordinary how so many times during this expedition we had luck on our side and things just fell into place and we didn't get killed and we did manage to get through. We were supplementing our meals at this time by fishing, and piranha was the easiest thing to catch. Catch one piranha, chop it up into bits, put it on the end of your hook, and you can catch lots more piranhas. We've probably eaten 13, 14 fish each, and I just feel alive again. My brain started working, my stomach started grumbling. Body's starting to operate again. Wow, that feels good. During this period, I just couldn't stop thinking about food. So far on this trip, we've eaten armadillo, spider monkey, kinkajou, tortoise, but this will be the first time ever that we've eaten any type of cat. It was extraordinary. I'd go to bed into my hammock, and you know, I was thinking about Mr. Kipling's French Fancies for some reason. The pink ones would just go round and round and round my head. And then in the morning, you know, when you can hear the sounds of the birds, and then the light comes up, and then the day started, and you think, I know that I haven't slept a single wink. And I would start going mad. And Cho had this expression, which was, quando I, quando no I, which if you translate it, it's incredibly annoying, because it just means when there is, and when there isn't, there isn't. Which is pretty annoying, until he then told me his backstory. And he'd, as an 11-year-old, the Shining Path had attacked his village, and he'd had to escape into the hills and live on his own as an 11-year-old. And his mum and dad were in the village, and he could hear the gunshots and the explosions and stuff going on. And his little expression of when there is, and when there isn't, was a way of him somehow innately understanding that there was no point in focusing on the things that he hadn't got. He was just wasting energy. He just had to just completely accept that and then move forward positively. Extraordinarily wise, but a sort of natural wisdom. But I decided this is a bit reckless. We need to get some money in. So I got a MacBook, an old white one, and we had the fastest internet in the Amazon. Actually, I'd point my satellite internet link up through a hole in the canopy, find a fallen tree, then have a corresponding hole in the canopy, point this thing up, and I knew Michael Jackson was dead within about 2 minutes of it being announced on the internet, and I was right in the middle of the Amazon jungle. And I thought, right, okay, we've got a very small following, and I'm not being humble here. We had about 450 people follow the expedition, but I put out a little play. I cut together on my laptop some of the footage that I've been recording and put it to a Coldplay soundtrack, and put a PayPal symbol button next to it and said, look, if you've been liking the expedition, please donate. And the response was utterly humbling. Within the next few months, we had £40,000 come into the expedition to reinsure us, to buy new satellite technology equipment, to buy Cho's flights home, to pay for the rest of the expedition. We were really, really lucky on this trip for so many reasons. We didn't get any malaria, typhoid, dengue, none of the big tropical diseases. I did get a botfly in my head. I don't know whether anyone has had botflies in the head. Not serious at all, not remotely dangerous. But to the end of the expedition, we were just caning it down roads, doing huge days, and about 21 hours before we were due to arrive on the beach, and I'd got my flights booked for the next day, and supposedly there was press that were organised to come to the beach on the last day. I started getting really faint, and then I came out in a nettle sting rash, like all over my body, bumps all over my body, and then I passed out in the road. And Cho said to me when I woke up, he's like, oh, okay, I reckon we need to have a couple of hours sleep. And I was like, I reckon you're probably right, Cho. And so we had a couple of hours sleep, and then with about 18 hours left to go, we had about 85 kilometres still to walk. So we walked all the way through the day, all the way through the evening, all the way through the night. And then as the sun came up and we hadn't had any sleep this night at all, these media crews started descending on us, sort of Reuters and Associated Press and CNN and stuff, and we were just like, this is extraordinary. Not only have we done 2.5 years of walking, and it looks like we're gonna reach the end today, but also we might even be recognised for doing it as well. And then, you know, when you're by the sea and you can hear the sort of the gulls and the waves starting to crash, and you could smell the salt in the air. And then we rounded this corner and we could just see the Atlantic Ocean stretched out in front of us. And Cho and I instinctively shrugged off our rucksacks and just grinned at each other and started legging it down the beach. And also, I'm not really sure why we started holding hands as we ran down the beach, which I thought was somewhat typical. The one day that the world's media is looking at you and you're holding hands, skipping down the beach. It was undeniably the best day of my life, but I wouldn't want to take all the credit for this expedition. Cho, he always knew that he wasn't going to be able to say that he'd walked the length of the Amazon. He joined in month 5, but he definitely did all of the hard stuff, and I have no idea whether I would have been able to complete it without him. At that point, he had never seen the sea before. He had never tasted salt water. He came from a landlocked part of Peru, and I had to explain to him that you couldn't drink salt water. That was how extraordinary it was. I experienced him going on his first elevator. I experienced him going on his first plane. But he gave up 2 years of his life to help me get through this, and he did it because he just wanted to embrace life, but also because he wanted to help me, which was amazing. 2.5 years of walking through the Amazon, and this is the Atlantic Ocean. I didn't think I was going to be this happy. I've been grumbling and moaning all the way down the road. It's just unbelievable. Absolutely unbelievable. That is my above and beyond story. I hope you enjoyed it. I've been Ed Stafford, and thank you very much for listening. Okay, post your questions in the comments below, and I'll be doing a live Q&A with another one of the Land Rover ambassadors in a few days, and I will try and answer them then. From me, goodbye.